Hi guys, welcome to the Full Earth Workshop. My name is Doug. I'm here with Landon.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Hey, we've just been painting the figures from episode 12. Do you remember when we made those Tamiya figures? That was a really fun project. Well, now I have taken a few minutes out of the last episode and placed it into this episode so you can get the full experience of painting these things. And Landon, of course, is doing all the work.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting by watching. I think you're going to do a really
Hopefully
good job.
you'll like the result.
Yeah, I got good faith in you. Let's hit it. Wow, can it be true? We're at episode 16 already? This is a fun one. We're celebrating all the people who fought in tanks in World War II in this episode, and we're featuring parts from Hanglong, RC Tank Legion Shop, Motto Toys, Clark, and Tigan Tanks. This is the big episode where we show you how we painted these figures. These are Tamiya 1/16 figures, and we've kind of chopped them up and made them fit the tank, the Tiger 1 Kit Bash tank we've been building for so long here. So Landon, why don't you lead us off and tell us what you're doing here?
So you can see I'm blocking in color with these figures right now, using enamel paints and Vallejo acrylic paints. And truthfully, this is the first time I've ever worked on any figures at this scale, so I'm just kind of playing around, blocking in color, like I said, and just seeing where I let the paints take me.
Well, you know, one thing that's kind of interesting about these figures, they are so small. We're talking 2.5 to 3 inches tall. And so working on these really have an advantage being young because your close focusing is really good because, it gets real difficult getting in real close. Now, let me ask you this. Why did you start with gray? Now, that wasn't primer. We did a primer previously, but then we went into laying down a gray first. What's going on there?
With this particular set of figures, I was kind of playing around. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do any sort of camouflage patterns on either of them, or if I wanted to have them as a Wehrmacht gray, or if I wanted to go for the SS black. And you'll see this progresses later on in the video, but I wanted to block it in gray because it's a good base layer. You can pretty much take the color to different directions with it. If I want to take it to black, I might be able to use some of the gray color later on for highlighting and things like that.
What's the logic behind using the black now for the gloves? Are you going to do anything to pop those things up?
I might bring in a few different paint colors in there just to kind of make them interesting. Right now I'm using enamel paint, and they work really well for hand brushing. I'm just kind of playing around, seeing what I can bring out from the character right now and bring it along.
We're starting on the jacket. Can you tell me what you're thinking about as you start this jacket?
Well, you see I've had this gray color blocked in. Now I'm trying to create some sort of highlights and shadows, and at this point I've pretty much decided that I'm going to make this a camouflage pattern on this particular jacket. I'm doing the technique called pre-shading. At the end of this, you won't see a whole lot of this showing through, but it's a good way to show how you can bring out highlights and bring shadows into this character with just bringing different shades of the same color.
So what's the idea? Are these colors, are they kind of transparent? Do they show through a bit, or how do you work that out?
Yeah, so this is actually a wash right here, and I've thinned down some Tamiya acrylics that are slightly darker hue. I've made them to the point where they're pretty transparent, and so you can kind of play around with them, have them seep into the crevices, and kind of create some shadows.
When you do this thinning, is there a particular kind of thinner that you recommend for these paints?
So Tamiya paints are pretty cool because they're actually alcohol-based acrylic paints, so they're a little different. They actually offer two different types of thinners that work with them. There's the acrylic thinner and the lacquer thinner. Both work pretty well for thinning them down, and both will give you good results. A lot of modelers swear by using the lacquer thinner, a lot of others use the acrylic, and I actually am one of the persons who uses the acrylic thinner, and it's given me good results so far.
We did have a little reaction of a couple of paints on the face, and we're going to go through that a little bit later. You might be able to see it. What exactly happened, Landon?
Well, with this point in time when I was painting this model, I didn't have access to all of my normal tools and paints and all of my thinners, and so I was trying to use some testers of thinner.
Were you cheating?
Yeah, pretty much. I was trying to use some testers thinner to kind of create a wash. Testers thinner is pretty well known to be very hot or very harsh, and it can eat through your paints pretty easily, and that's what happened on the face. So I had to touch it up and put some more paints on it.
Here I'm posting a little photograph which shows what we're aiming toward with this particular figure. Walk us through this, Landon. What are you doing?
So this camouflage pattern is used kind of in the late war period A lot of different tank crews were issued some various camouflages during the season that they were fighting in, and this particular one has a ton of spots. I don't really know the exact name of it. So what I'm trying to do is replicate the best I can all the different spots and the different layers that are seen in this camouflage. And it'll look a little wacky at first as I'm throwing in a bunch of color, but I think at the end it kind of came together.
Well, it gets really busy, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But I guess we were trying to figure out the base colors, which, what did we decide on, 3 or 4?
I think there were 4 different colors we had. There's kind of a dark brown color, then a slightly lighter tan color, a light green, and a dark green, which is what we decided to go with. Now, there are different variations of this, and I think there are multiple different ways you could approach this, but this is kind of what we did.
Well, tell me the order of operations. What did you do first, and then what came after?
Well, a few seconds ago, you saw me putting in some brown colors, so I would use the brown as kind of the base layer. And then I went in with all these other colors, the light green, the dark green, and this other tan color, and just started to build in color. A lot of spots were on this camouflage, so you see me just putting dots everywhere.
Well, it was kind of interesting because we were building up. There were certain areas that were real light tan, and then you had to add the dark to it, and then there's some darks you have to add the light. And it seems like we just went back and forth to try to figure this out.
Anyway, you can see the figure coming together now. I'm not sure if this figure and this camouflage are really, adequate to go with the period of the tank, but, I think it's going to be fun. I think if it looks good, then go with it.
Now, we did find them. In photographs, we found soldiers wearing black on top and then wearing these fatigues or this camouflage down below. So not a lot of color photographs available, a lot of black and white. Now we're going to start on the commander of this tank. And the other ones seem to go together easier. I don't know why. You'll see when we start out on this one, it looks like we're putting shaving cream on this guy. But he ends up looking good, but it's a real slow process. He's looking pretty bad for, the first 5-10 minutes, which is kind of the way it is with these figures, isn't it? When you first start blocking in color, they look strange.
Your vote of confidence is deafening. But yeah, I'm just playing around with this. And with blacks, it's kind of difficult. It's kind of like black on a car. If you have black, it looks great, but it gets dirty pretty easily and shows any scratches very easily. So I think it kind of applies when you're painting figures that are black.
One of my mentors in the design career that I've had told me once that a lot of drawing and painting is just experimentation. You just jump in on it and you start, and the piece actually starts to tell you what it needs. And I think that's kind of the way this guy is. We start blocking in the color, and he looks real pale, and he looks real black, and you just let him talk back and forth with you. Is he talking, Landon?
Well, I think so. I guess at the end you'll be able to see if you like the result or not. I think this figure comes together once I start painting a lot of the different accessories that he has on his person. Yeah. And so right now I'm starting to mix together a brown hue that I can use for the satchel.
Now, I see you have quite an array of paints here. And what is this little device you have that holds them all? It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's this cool laser cut paint holder that I got off Amazon. I think it was actually a gift, and I hold a lot of my Vallejo paints on there.
Well, how much are we talking?
I think it was $15-20. It wasn't terrible, but it's good for organization, so there you go.
One thing that I really find interesting when I watch you paint, you do a few things a lot differently than I do. First of all, you work really quickly. And I tend to kind of really slow around the edges. You go real fast, but you're able to get your edges real tight in there.
Well, thanks. I think the reason why I'm working so quickly is I just don't want the paint to dry on my paintbrush. And so I'm just trying to lob as much paint as I can on there.
Is that a problem? Yes. I mean, does it happen with these paints?
Yeah. I mean, occasionally, especially if you're trying to do small details, and you have a very minuscule amount of paint on your paintbrush, you could dry pretty quickly.
Okay, now I see you working with a Q-tip. What's going on?
So at this point, I am doing some dry brushing, and I'm using the Q-tip to try to bring back a little too much paint that I put on the shoulder there. So just wiping it off.
As we go a little bit further into this, you start doing the really, really fine details. There was edging on the hat, and there's the metals and so forth, and that's really difficult to get correctly. But I noticed you have a kind of an interesting technique on cleaning that area up.
Right. So I put a lot of the silver on there, and some people have the ability to paint these one go, but I don't. And so I laid on some silver color and try to dry brush as much as I can. But I decided after doing that, I got, of course, a little too much on there, so I went back and painted over it. Right here, I'm painting the belt of the character. A lot of times, leather and fabric will have a different hue, so.
Now, I noticed that here you have a lot of modeling, even in that black. How is that done? Because I saw you, it was just like you were blocking it in, but I do see that it's moving up and down. It kind of gives you the impression of a very worn leather jacket.
Right, I'm trying to show it as dusty, or maybe if some of the color has faded a bit. I mean, you got to think this guy's been wearing this for a really long time. I mean, tankers were pretty well known to not particularly be up on their hygiene because, I mean, they're out in the middle of the front. Where are they going to bathe? Once in a blue moon. And where are they going to get new clothes? Where are the clothes going to get laundered? Not very many places. So things get pretty dirty, so I'm trying to show that.
If you've been looking real closely, you can see there's kind of a smudge on this guy's face, and unfortunately I didn't video that little section. What did you do to fix his face?
So I just covered it up. I put some more of that Tesser's enamel paint over it. I think it looks pretty good.
We're zooming in really, really close now in 4K, so you can see there is a lot of modeling up and down. The figures, actually, as they're done a little bit more roughly, they look more realistic than they do if you would do them out of a airbrush. So when you really back off on these, it's a really nice figure.
Right now I'm finishing up all the little details, painting up this ribbon, and I think it looks finished.
Well, Lando, you have perfect timing because that's exactly what we're doing now. We're going to do the reveal of these characters, and we're showing them in the top of the tank, and take a look.
Terrific job, Landon. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a fun project.